Hello, Jeff.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good
Recording
evening.
in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the open house for draft plan of subdivision, draft plan of condominium, and zoning bylaw amendment applications for 9 and 11 Kerman Avenue. Before we begin, I would like to provide the land acknowledgement statement. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendourong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Thank you. The basic premise of this open house is to provide the opportunity for the public to provide input on the proposed application. I would like to stress that there have been no decisions or recommendations made by council or planning staff on these applications. To ensure a fair process, members of council are to hear public input but not engage in debate about the merits of the application. Opinions on the application should not be made at this time. Members will have the opportunity to express all their views and concerns when the final staff report and recommendation comes forward. A subsequent public meeting will be held at a later date in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, and public engagement will be welcome then as well. This meeting is conducted in accordance with the town's procedural bylaw. All participants are asked to conduct themselves with decorum and respect and provide the opportunity for all members of the public to express their opinion in an environment of tolerance on all points of view and free of intimidation. The intent is to create a venue to encourage people to participate in the process and provide their input. With us this evening is Jared Marcus of the IBI Group, planning staff in attendance, Adam Gignac, planner and Walter Basic, Assistant Director of Planning. Tonight, we will start with staff providing a brief presentation outlining the process and the application. Next, the consultant team will provide an overview of the proposal, and that will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you have not already done so, please ensure that you have signed in so you will be informed of future meetings on this proposal. As we navigate the virtual open house meeting, we ask all participants for your patience. Each participant will be called in order and will be provided 10 minutes to speak. Each presenter may speak only once. If you hear your comment presented by someone else, please do not duplicate the remarks. All of the comments are being recorded and will be taken into consideration. When you are called, we ask you state your name and address. Persons addressing council should confine the remarks to the business at hand and shall direct their comments or questions to the chair. Staff are taking notes of all the questions asked this evening. At the end of the delegations, the consultant will be asked to respond to all of the questions and comments raised. If you feel that your questions have not been responded to this evening, you can email our planning department at planning@grimsby.ca. Welcome, Adam. You will be giving your presentation now. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Gignac, and I'm a planner that's working for the town of Grimsby. I just wanted to thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to join us for the open house this evening. And so the project we'll be discussing this evening is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of condominium, and draft plan of subdivision, planned to be located at the current site of 9 and 11 Kerman Avenue. Next slide. Yep. To begin this open house, I'll be going through just this brief presentation, providing you all with some insight into the process of this application, as well as to briefly introduce the application itself, what is being planned for the site, though I'll leave most of that for Mr. Jared Marcus. He's joining us here from IBI Group in Hamilton, and he's here to provide some greater details about the application. So after his presentation, there will be time to ask any questions or provide any comments or concerns that you may have about the application. So just to go over the purpose of tonight's meeting, we'd like to provide you all with an overview of the planning process for these types of applications. So this includes the process from start to finish, including where exactly the town is in the process. An overview of the policy and regulatory framework shall also be provided, including the relevant official plan policies that are in place. Mr. Marcus will also provide you with some additional details about the proposal. And finally, we're also here to answer questions you might have and gather some feedback about the proposal. And this will all be taken into consideration and identify any potential revisions that may be needed. So why can plans or bylaws change? So under the Planning Act, authority is provided to submit applications for development plans that may not meet the current official plan or zoning bylaw. In the case of this application, the zoning bylaw requirements cannot be met or are wishing to be changed, so the zoning bylaw amendment is required. So the town's role in this process is to process these applications that come in. These applications are only able to amend the official plan or zoning bylaw if it is determined that the proposed changes comply with the overall intent of the official plan, and the result of these changes is a development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. Yep, so what we have here is a flow chart that identifies some of the major milestones in the planning process. So applications for a zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, and draft plan of condominium start with a pre-consultation meeting with town staff and any relevant agencies that would have interest in the project. So this includes, but isn't limited to, the Niagara Escarpment Commission and Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, the region of Niagara, etc. So this meeting would outline the requirements an applicant would need to submit for a submission. The pre-consultation meeting for this specific project, 911 Kerman Avenue, was held on March 18th of 2021. So once an application is ready, the applicant would submit the required documents and fees to the town for the town to review for completion. And upon the application being deemed complete, a notice would be sent out and agencies would be asked for comments. And the public is also able to provide comments at this time. So this happened back in October, the beginning of October. For this application, any documents related to the proposal are posted on the current planning applications page on the town's website. And any notices for open houses and a future public meeting for this project would also be at this location on the current planning applications page. So we are currently at the open house stage, which offers an introduction of the application to all of you. The open house will be followed by a public meeting at a further date, which will provide further opportunity for comments on the application. And along the way, revisions may be made to the application, and any concerns from any agencies, town staff, or members of the public will be looked at. And after the public meeting, if all of the concerns about the proposal have been believed to have been met, staff will prepare a recommendation report for council regarding the application, and a decision on the application would be made at a future council meeting with the opportunity to appeal the decision afterwards. You're good now, Peter. So the planning process is an open process, so it allows the public to have a say on the process. This open house provides one opportunity to give your opinion on the application, with the public meeting to come at a future date as another opportunity. So you can write a letter or email addressed to the planning department to provide comments. So the email would be planning@grimsby.ca. And you can also send a copy of your letter or email to your counselors as an alternative. So just to stay informed about this application, you're invited to provide your mailing address to the planning department. And by doing so, you'd receive any notice of future meetings, information on how to obtain a staff report, information about speaking in front of the committee, and information on how the decision can be appealed. So moving on to a brief introduction to the proposal. This slide shows the preliminary proposed draft plan. So this application for the draft plan of subdivision is to create 47 new residential lots, of which 44 would contain semi-detached dwellings and 3 would contain single detached dwellings. The zoning bylaw amendment would be to change the designations on the properties from residential detached 1, RD 115 zoning, and neighborhood development zoning, ND, to residential detached 3, RD 350, and residential multiple 1, RM1, to accommodate the dwellings. And then additionally, Sumac Court would be extended and have a cul-de-sac ending, as you can see on the left of the image there. And a common condominium road would run through the site, connecting the Sumac Court in west with Kerman Avenue in the east. And just to summarize all of this, the draft plan of subdivision application is what would be creating the lots and the blocks on the site. The draft plan of condominium would include everything in the common element. So that would include the servicing and the common element road going through the site. And the zoning bylaw amendment application would be for the changing zoning designations and the regulations such as the setbacks, the height, the building depth, and parking requirements for the property. So the official plan designates the current 911 Kerman Avenue as a low-density residential area. The policies for this designation are located in section 3.4.2 of the official plan. So this designation permits a mixture of residential uses, including single-detached and semi-detached dwellings. It's considered a stable residential neighborhood, but does allow for limited development, evolution, and rejuvenation. And the maximum height permitted in this official plan designation is 2.5 stories. And just to summarize the zoning a little bit quickly, so the current zoning on the property is residential detached 1, RD115, and neighborhood development, or ND. So the RD1 zone permits a range of residential uses and the 15% maximum lot coverage, while the neighborhood development permits current existing uses on the site and existing zoning regulations. So your existing setback, your existing height, etc. So the zoning designations are proposed to be changed, with 2 new lots becoming residential detached 3 zoning and the remaining 45 lots becoming residential multiple 1. And there are also proposed modified regulations for lot coverage, interior side yard, exterior side yard, rear yard setbacks, building depth, and the required accessible parking space dimensions, though I'll leave those for Mr. Marcus to go over. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Jordan.
Thank you for your presentation, Adam. Next up, we'll have Jared Marcus from IBI Group. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I do have a presentation if I'm permitted to share that.
Absolutely.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Great, thank you, Mayor Jordan. My name is Jared Marcus. I'm here from IBI Group. I'm an associate and senior planner with IBI Group, and I've been in this role for about 18 years now. We're representing Tarbit Construction for this development, which we're calling Evergreen Estates. And as you've just heard from Mr. Gignac, we have active subdivision, condominium, and zoning bylaw amendment applications before you tonight. So jumping straight into my presentation, we have up here, the first slide on the screen is a neighborhood or community context to give an overview of where the property is in Grimsby. You can see the property limits are outlined in red here. They're located on the west end of Grimsby with Livingston Avenue a little ways north of the subject lands, Kerman Avenue running through the middle of your screen, which provides direct frontage to the development, Main Street West along the south side, which has a current secondary access, and then Linden Lane and Sumac Court, which is on the west side of the, to the west of the development. Broadly speaking, the land uses around this development are predominantly residential in nature, with the exception of the Catholic High School to your north. To your northeast and east, you'll see that there's predominantly stable older subdivisions with your older large lot residential development that's typical of the southerly part of Kerman and Main Street West. To the west, you have immediate west of the property, you have the the Nixon Hall property, which is a designated heritage house, and then you'll have residential development to the west and northwest, which is typical of modern suburban residential development. These neighborhoods are all approximately 20 years old to the north and northwest. Next slide gives you a more zoomed in context of the subject lands. Again, property outlined in red on the screen. You can see that the predominant land use is the Van Geest greenhouses, and greenhouses have been a land use on this property since about the early 1930s, though the iteration of the greenhouse you see here is more recent, from the 70s into the early 2000s. Also on the subject lands, there's a existing two-story single detached dwelling which is on Kerman Avenue, and another two-story dwelling which is interior to the subject lands. There is some mature vegetation, not a lot, but predominantly hedgerows around the perimeter of the subject lands. The subject lands themselves are approximately 2.2 hectares in size. That's 5.5 acres for those who work in Imperial. There is a frontage of about 46 meters on Kerman Avenue, a frontage of approximately 10 meters on Main Street, and they abut a 20-meter right-of-way that is the end of Sumac Court here on the west side. Next slide shows the context of what you see of the property from the street. The top left image is the view from Main Street looking north. This is an existing service driveway to the greenhouse and to 9 Kerman Avenue. In the middle of the screen is a view looking west at the property, which is the dwelling 11 Kerman Avenue. And on the left-hand side of the image, you can see the service driveway to the greenhouse from Kerman Avenue. And then on the bottom is that interface with the existing cul-de-sac on Sumac Court. All you can see is the side of a greenhouse. There's no vehicular access to the property. Just to reiterate what Mr. Gignac said about the property, it is located in the official plan in the low density residential area. Within the zoning bylaw, as he noted, it's the majority of the property is neighborhood development with a residential zone for the existing dwelling on 11 Kerman Avenue. Key takeaways from the official plan are that the designation permits singles, semis, and semi-detached units with a maximum height of 2.5 stories and a maximum density of 25 units per hectare. And the zoning currently only permits what is there today, so any redevelopment of the site would require a zoning bylaw amendment. And as mentioned, we have formal development applications in with the municipality for zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, and draft plan of condominium. Next slide up here shows you a colorized version of one of the development sketches that Mr. Gignac showed. This just tries to illustrate a little more clearly than a black and white drawing on these screens does for those present today. The development proposal is for 3 single detached dwellings, 2 of which are located here on Kerman Avenue, and 1 which is located south of the proposed Sumac Court extension. And the remainder of the development would be made up of 44 semi-detached dwellings, and that would be internal to the site on the private condominium road, as well as a few lots on Sumac Court. As was mentioned, we are proposing to extend Sumac Court into the development to provide a formal cul-de-sac, which would meet the town's current standards, whereas the current cul-de-sac on Sumac Court does not meet those standards, which are required for emergency vehicles and waste collection. Coming off of that Sumac Court extension, we would have the private roadway, which connects to Kerman Avenue and provides a circular loop around the development for the other units. Coming off the bottom end of the private road loop, you have a pedestrian connection to Main Street, which will replace the existing vehicular access, so there would not be any vehicular access to Main Street. You'll see here in the middle of the screen, we have proposed 20 visitor parking spaces. That would be in addition to the 2-car garages and 2-car driveways, which would be proposed for each of the units. And in the middle here, you'll see there's a small green space, which would be a passive recreation area for the residents of the development, as well as providing underground stormwater storage tanks. And lastly, you'll see very faintly there is a proposed sidewalk leading from Kerman Avenue to the east, moving through the development and connecting and providing a connection to Sumac Court, so full pedestrian movements through the development as well. Next slide up shows you some preliminary architectural renderings. As you've heard, we're only just into the zoning review, so these are subject to change, but these are preliminary renderings of what the developer is thinking the buildings will look like. So they have a bit of a historical flair to them, a lot of articulation to provide that animation to the street, and a lot of different colors and some different materials that would be proposed. So this is a schematic of what those dwellings may look like if approved. Next drawing shows you the formal technical draft plan of subdivision drawing that Mr. Gignac talked about. This establishes the lots and blocks that will facilitate the development. You have 2 lots here fronting on Kerman and 45 lots for singles and semis internally. This large middle blank space, that's the private condominium or the common element condominium, which would have the private roadway, sidewalk, visitor parking, services, amenities, etc. within it. And then lastly, you have the formal extension and dedication of land to the town, which would facilitate the extension of this. You can see this smaller version of the cul-de-sac here. Next slide shows just the technical draft plan of condominium drawing. This gray area is the draft plan of condominium. So most of these lots would pay into the condominium to pay for the maintenance, potentially waste collection, maintenance of the roads, so snow storage, visitor parking, etc., things like that. Next slide shows just an overview of the proposed zoning amendment of the lands. You can see here the diagonal hatch. This is the neighborhood development zone, and this rectangle here is the existing RD1. So we are proposing to rezone the vast majority of this property for residential multiple, and the front corner is currently proposed as residential detached 3, so just for single detached dwellings. And I'll go through the specifics in more detail a little bit later in the presentation. So as Mr. Gignac mentioned, prior to submitting applications, we had to attend a formal pre-consultation meeting with the town, the region, the NEC, and other agencies to find out what kind of detail or what kind of information they needed from us to support formal applications. And a few of those are listed here as a stormwater and servicing design, vegetation management, archaeological, geotechnical, environmental, urban design, and planning justification. You'll note what's not required here. There was no cultural heritage impact assessment was not required despite the age of the land uses and some of the structures, and a traffic impact assessment was not required as part of the development. So those were two technical reports that did not make it into the broader analysis. So the next few slides will provide an overview of what the outcome or the conclusions of some of those reports are. So this first one here shows the civil design. So you'll see blue, green, and yellow on this screen. Blue represents stormwater drainage, which is how we'll be treating the runoff from various wet weather events. The red shows the sanitary sewer system, and the green shows the water main system. So the key takeaway from this is that the cul-de-sac here will be collected with stormwater and drained into the existing sewers as on Sumac Court, but the rest of the development will drain independently into sewers within the site and be collected into a stormwater tank that will exist underground below the amenity area. Ultimately, that would be treated and released at a certain prescribed rate and ultimately into the Kerman stormwater sewer. Under the current development scheme, this sewer would have to be upgraded, so there would be construction from Kerman to Livingston. The sanitary will be collected internally in a similar manner, but in this case, it will outlet to the Sumac Court sewers, and there is capacity within those sewers to handle the effluent outflow here without any upgrades. Similarly, you have the green, which is the water connection, which loops from Kerman to Sumac Court and through the development. And similar, there would be no upgrades to the water main system on either Kerman or Sumac to support the development. Next slide shows the vegetation and management. As you saw on some of the early slides, there's a lot of mature vegetation, the vast majority of which is boundary hedgerows. Any development of this site is going to require removal of trees. We acknowledge that. The vast majority in this current scheme. So with the developer and the engineers, we are working towards trying to minimize the amount of boundary tree removal, whether through all different engineering design or different layouts. Ultimately, though, there is going to be removals, and we will work with the consultants to find places to replant some of these, and if possible, the developer will work with adjacent property owners to ensure that boundary trees can be, or that existing screening can be reinstated. Next slide just shows a summary of some of those reports. The archaeological assessment didn't recover any archaeological material. I mentioned that no heritage report was required, but we are working with the existing owners, the Van Geest family, to plan for some plaques to be placed within the development and street names to provide that historical context if the development is approved and built out. Geotechnical report just reviews the soils to ensure that typical residential development can be supported. The phase 1 and 2 environmental report found historical contamination, which is consistent with greenhouse uses, likely will result in soil removal. And the urban design report reviews the town's urban design guidelines and whether this proposal meets those guidelines. In this case, the report found that it does balance the requirements found in those guidelines, as well as limiting any adverse impacts on neighboring residents. And lastly, you have the planning justification report, which is the big report which we have to do for these developments to analyze how our proposed developments meet or are consistent with higher order policy from the provincial level, as well as the regional level, and then down to the town of Grimsby official plan. Each one of those documents all have very consistent guidelines about intensification in the urban area and providing a mix of housing units in the urban area. Most specifically, we would point to the permitted uses in the town of Grimsby official plan, which is singles and semis, and a maximum density of 25, whereas this development proposes a maximum density of 21 units per hectare. So on the whole, the planning justification report finds that the development is consistent with those policy documents. So the last bit of the presentation is just to outline for you the specific zoning that we're proposing. We talked about this slide a little earlier. The majority of the site will be residential multiple, and the front lots will be residential detached. So speaking to those lots first, they will be rezoned to an RD3 with site-specific modifications. You can see those modifications here in red on the chart. So maximum lot coverage, that applies regardless of what zone we choose, because the zones, when the clean zones don't have lot coverage to them. We're asking for a change to the minimum front yard, a change to the minimum corner side yard, a change to the interior side yard, and a change to the rear yard, and a change to the maximum building depth. And so this slide here shows where the impact of those proposed changes on those two lots are. So these are the two single detached dwellings that front onto Kerman Avenue. So you'll see here that we are asking for a change in the minimum building setback to 10 meters, where the bylaw looks to have setbacks similar to existing development on either side of the development. This setback of 10 meters is quite large in considering residential development, and is consistent with the setbacks that exist on the east side of Kerman. We are seeking to amend the interior side lot lines that would apply here on the north, as well as between the two units, a change to the corner side yard, which would only impact the existing or the proposed development, and a change to the rear yard setback to 7.5, which is consistent with typical residential development, and that would only impact the existing or the proposed development. So the only measurable impact with this zoning change that you would see from the street would be this setback here of 10 meters. And so that's the residential development 3 zone that applies to just the 2 singles at the front of, or that front onto Kerman Avenue. Next slide shows the proposed residential multiple 1 zone for the project, and that applies to most of the development. You'll see here that we are proposing to add a use, which is the 1 single detached dwelling. It currently is not permitted as of right in the RM1 zone. So we're looking to add that for that 1 lot that was south of the cul-de-sac. You'll see here again in red, the provisions we're looking to change in the RM1 zone. So we're adding our own maximum lot coverage to each type of use. We're meeting or exceeding the minimum lot frontage requirement. We're meeting the minimum front yard requirement. We're looking to change the corner side yard setback. We're meeting the interior side yard setbacks. We're meeting the rear yard setbacks. And we're looking to increase the maximum building depth for only a handful of those units. And most importantly, we're meeting the maximum building height provisions in the bylaw. And then the next slide, this is the last slide, actually, it shows where those proposed modifications will impact the development. So you have here the minimum corner side yard of 3 meters that impacts internally to the site, as well as the 1 unit extending from or abutting Sumac Court. You have a maximum maximum building depth, which only applies to these blocks of units here, and that's based on minimum zoning setbacks. So that may not be the final built form, but it's zoning reflective of the current design. And Mr. Gignac did mention in his presentation that we were modifying the barrier-free parking spaces, and this is to provide parking spaces that are consistent with the regulations in the Accessible Ontario Act. So by and large, the proposed modifications we're seeking won't have an impact on adjacent land uses, and broadly, won't have an impact greater than what the parent zoning would have if we were to adhere to that. And this last sketch or last slide shows you in a little greater detail what that proposed concept is going to look like, and this is consistent with the colorized one that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. So those are the details we have for you tonight. We are happy to try to answer any questions. If there are any requests for clarity or anything, we're happy to stick around.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation, Jared. And as I said in the opening, all the questions will be answered after the presenters. First up, we have resident Lynn Watson, 60 Sumac Court. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. It's Walton.
All right, sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. My husband, Roy, and I are here. We understand that should this proceed, the street in front of us will be narrowed to conform with the regular size of the street, whereas we have the curve right now. We have the cul-de-sac in front of us, and that will be taken away and the street will be narrowed. So we would be concerned that there would be a sidewalk on the south side of the street. There is one now currently on Linden. And there are going to be sidewalks in the proposed development if the sidewalk could extend across the street from us. We also have a different grading in the elevation to the side of us where we abut the proposed land. There's a difference in elevation. We're assuming that grading would be smoothed out, I guess.
I think he's still working on it.
To accommodate it. And there is a water valve also on the east side of the front of our property, which with the new water proposal going through, I'm assuming that will be incorporated and no longer there. It's currently drained 3 or 4 times a year. The other concern that we would have is that, which doesn't exactly fit, but behind us in the schoolyard, about 15 feet behind our back fence, there are several holes in the ground, and there is something buried down there, some kind of, there's a grate, and I'm assuming it's some sort of drainage. It doesn't seem to be draining anything, and when there's a rain, it floods in there. Can we assume that that will be corrected? I think those are our main concerns.
Great, thank you. And up next, we have resident Sam Gurgis, 40 Esplanade Lane. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, thank you. I'm just only actually would like to maybe when you got approval, what is the time for the project for phase 1 and phase 2? Thanks.
I suppose we really should put the camera back on.
Sam, was that your only question, or do you have more comments?
So there is no comments. It's fine. It's okay.
All right, thank you very much. Up next, we have resident Paul Phelps, 17 Kerman Avenue. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Jordan. My name is Paul Phelps, and my wife Wendy and I live at 17 Kerman Avenue. We've lived there for just over 20 years, and we also own the vacant building lot at 15 Kerman Avenue, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed development. And while I'm sure I and most of the existing neighbors would prefer if the new development was single-family homes, similar to the rest of Sumac Court and Kerman Avenue, I generally am supportive of the proposal, subject to 4 issues that I'll outline. And I've already discussed these with Mr. Tarbett prior to tonight, and I'd like to thank Mr. Tarbett for being very open and transparent with me, and I believe with the rest of the neighbors and the neighborhood. I believe that he'll do a very good job, and I believe with some modifications that the proposal will generally be compatible with the existing neighborhood. Most of my concerns relate to the somewhat unique and historic nature of Kerman Avenue, and I'm sure Mayor Jordan, you're well aware of that, and the other councillors that are here tonight are aware of that. I believe it's important in reviewing this proposal to take that unique nature into account. So I'd just like to touch on that first. From a traffic point of view, nobody likes to see more traffic in their neighborhood, but Kerman Avenue is already a very busy residential road. It's used as a connector to and from Main Street West to Livingston Avenue, to Grimsby Square Plaza, and to the rest of the downtown core. The intersection of Kerman and Main Street is quite a dangerous intersection because of the restricted visibility triangles on both sides of Kerman Avenue from the existing older homes and trees that are there. And Kerman Avenue is also used by Blessed Trinity School for a large volume, and sometimes during the day, literally a train of school buses twice per day that also add to the congestion and the poor intersection at Main Street. And then compounding this, Kerman Avenue is also a long, straight, sloping road with no natural traffic calming features. And this leads regularly to excessive speeds by both cars and buses. And from a historic point of view, Kerman Avenue has, as the planners have alluded to a little bit, Kerman Avenue has many large historic homes on larger lots on the west side, many dating from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And these are predominantly zoned RD1, which is the highest residential zoning in Grimsby to protect the neighborhood's character. And then in addition, Kerman Avenue, as many of you know, was repaved completely in the fall of 2020. So we have a nice newly paved street, which all the residents are very proud of. So taking all this into account, my first concern is the proposed zoning change for the existing single home and lot that's currently 11 Kerman Avenue. I believe that this should remain as one single lot. The zoning should stay where it is at RD 1.15 as it presently exists, which is appropriate to maintain the compatibility with the other existing large and historic lots on the west side of Kerman Avenue. The proposed RD 3.5 zoning is not compatible with the existing neighborhood on Kerman Avenue. And I understand in talking to Mr. Tarbett that he's already planning to revise the application to reflect this change, and by keeping the proposed lots 1 through 4 as one large lot, which I believe is a good decision. And assuming that that happens, I'm fine with that. Secondly, I believe the proposed amenity space, which the planner also mentioned serves as a stormwater underground storage, should be moved slightly east and swapped with lots 5 and 6 in order to provide a larger buffer between the proposed higher density semis and our single family lot and homes on Kerman Avenue. I think this will also line up better with the condo drainage where it drains into the Blessed Trinity property. And from talking to Mr. Tarbett, I believe he's already considering this modification. And thirdly, I believe that the existing greenhouse driveway to Kerman Avenue should not be used as an entrance or exit for vehicle traffic to the proposed development. All vehicle traffic should be directed through the existing municipal road system on Sumac Court and Linden Lane out to Main Street West. The existing greenhouse driveway should be restricted to pedestrian traffic and could also serve as a secondary access for emergency vehicles. And there's many reasons why I think this makes sense. Both Sumac Court and Linden Lane are full municipal roads leading to Main Street West, which of course is an arterial road. Kerman Avenue is already a very busy street with traffic issues that I've mentioned earlier. And this will also prevent downtown traffic, people either coming or going from downtown that use Kerman Avenue from cutting through the condo development to avoid the difficult and often congested intersection at Kerman Avenue and Main Street West. And this type of emergency access and pedestrian pathway works well in many other areas of the town of Grimsby, and I think could work well here as well. And my last concern relates to storm drainage. The plan proposes, as the planner mentioned, a new storm sewer by digging up Kerman Avenue from the development all the way down to Livingston Avenue. It'd be a shame for our newly paved street. The town's paid a lot of money to have repaved. It'd be a shame to have that newly paved street dug up, and it would be quite a disruption to the neighborhood. And I believe there's a better solution. I suggest that the existing storm drainage outlet and pipe running from the existing greenhouse property through Blessed Trinity to Kerman Avenue could be upgraded and used, and that the town assists the developer to make that happen. I think it'd be much less expensive, less disturbance to the neighborhood, and not ruin the new pavement on Kerman Avenue. And then I think I heard my time go, but one very last comment, which doesn't relate directly to the proposed development, but I think the town could consider a three-way stop at the intersection of Kerman and Hazelwood to calm traffic speeds on Kerman Avenue. It'd be a very inexpensive solution to traffic safety in our neighborhood. So thank you very much, Mayor Jordan, for allowing me to make my comments, and I'm very happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And up next, we have Lisa Bradley, 71 Sumac Court. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, hello. We've prepared a submission that as a household, and my son Martin's going to read it.
All right, welcome, Martin.
Martin, hi. So good evening. The household and most of our neighbors on Sumac Court are mostly in support of the development. However, there are some serious issues that do need to be looked at. The first issue that we have is the proposed Sumac Court extension. This development proposes an eastern Sumac Court extension with two entrances to the private development that further connects to Kerman Avenue. Currently, there is no traffic-related information provided, such as line marking plans or any traffic control measures, and we've learned now that there's going to be no traffic impact study as well. However, something needs to be analyzed here, because our first issue is with the safety and operation of this so-called intersection entrance extension. It's very questionable how this extension will work. I'm not sure where a three-leg intersection on a wide court currently exists. There's going to be sightline issues. There's many driveways with cars backing out, cars going through the entrances. You could have parked vehicles as well. It's going to end up being like wacky races down there, and it's going to be a potential collision zone, which I'm not sure the town wants to have. Additionally, we're concerned with the proximity of the extension to the Sumac Court and Linden Lane intersection. Our considerations being made to turn this into an all-way stop intersection to accommodate the traffic. These are some considerations that we want to see before approval. However, we've come up with some potential solutions for this. The Sumac Court extension could have an island-style median in the middle of the extension, which would force one-directional driving. It would turn this proposed extension into a roundabout style. This has already been done before in Grimsby on Sophie Court and Queens Court. An island median in the court extension would add visual separation between the existing development on Sumac Court and the new development. Additionally, it would simplify the intersection entrance mess that's going on there and the traffic safety hazards, as all the vehicles would be forced to drive and turn in one direction. However, alternatively, we can avoid this questionable court extension and private road entrance altogether by exploring the idea of having the development only access from Kerman Avenue. And this leads us to our next issue with the development, which is the private road connection. The development provides a connection between Kerman Avenue and Sumac Court. However, this is by way of a private road rather than a public road. Private condominium road developments are a strategy growing in popularity, so developers can fit more units onto their site and often have lower development charges. However, in this case, there are issues with having a private road that connects two existing public roadways, and that's around the legality of who can use it. Having a connection will encourage non-residents to travel through the private development as a route from Main Street to Kerman Avenue and vice versa. However, the nature of a private road is that it is for the use of not for the use of non-residents. Private condominium roads are typically defined as roads entirely on private property to serve the residential units on that property with limited potential to carry non-local traffic. For this reason, and this very nature, they should be one way in, one way out, and not serve as a connection. Using a private road to connect two public roads that could provide an additional link for non-residents is problematic in planning design. Private road condominium developments are typically used when space is limited and where a public road development would not be feasible. We saw this locally with the development of Heritage Lane on Main Street. They should not, however, be used in place of where a public road development is feasible. Additionally, a private road development such as this contributes to the further privatization of sidewalks and green space in our town. And this area already has limited pedestrian connection and has a lack of town parks. So at a minimum, we are asking for strict traffic measures to be implemented to facilitate this questionable use of private roads. Measures such as speed bumps and signage on Linden Lane, Sumac Court, and within the development are needed to deter non-residents from using the connecting private roads to limit non-resident traffic volumes. We need signage that states not a through road, but again, this will not do much to deter non-resident use. This development, in my opinion, is a misuse of private condominium road developments. The intended use to connect Sumac Court and Kerman Avenue should be by way of public road. If the developer wants to continue with the use of a private road development in order to maintain their density wants, the development should have a singular in and out entrance only. Between the two options of Sumac Court and Kerman Avenue is by far the most appropriate choice to facilitate this development and the traffic. I'm not sure how the fire department would feel about the existing homes on Sumac Court, the 5 new homes on Linden Lane being built, and the 44 unit part of this development, all using Linden Lane as an in and out entrance to Main Street. And lastly, as a side note, the sidewalk connection from Linden Lane should be connected on the southern side of Sumac Court to the development, since other sidewalk connections are being made to Kerman Avenue and Main Street. And yeah, that's our concerns.
Thank you, Martin. Up next, we have resident Neil Newberry, 62 Sumac Court. Welcome, Neil. Don't see Neil Newberry. Up next, we have Greg Smith, 242 Main Street West. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to speak. As mentioned, my name's Greg Smith. I live at 242 Main Street West with my wife, and we're on the northeastern corner of Highway 8 in Kerman. However, our driveway is on Kerman. We've lived here for almost 27 years. And in fact, when my wife and I were on our first date, we drove by our house, and I wanted to drive her by my favorite house in Grimsby, and this is where we now and still live. So my concerns, or our concerns, with the subdivisions as proposed, or the subdivision as proposed, are basically in 3 areas: traffic and safety, and other people have mentioned that as well. The character of the street as it exists now, and the impact or potential impact of the building process. Traffic and safety. So Kerman Avenue between Highway 8 and Livingston is a relatively short stretch of 2-lane road, which includes street parking on the west side. I'm pointing to the west side because that's where it is to me now. Traffic and congestion associated with the 47 residences, and who knows, I just did a little calculation. If each of those places has 2 cars, that's 94 more vehicles would be significant. And from the documentation in the proposal, and as stated tonight, there would be no traffic impact studies. Pardon me. And how much traffic is estimated at peak morning and evening hours, assuming that people entering and exiting the proposed development will be driving. The main cause for concern for us, obviously, is at the corner of Highway 8 and Kerman. There are issues of visibility, as Mr. Phelps mentioned, with vehicles turning onto Highway 8 from Kerman. There's also a significant pedestrian presence, including students from GSS and Blessed Trinity, twice-a-day busing, and problems with speeding along Highway 8 and Kerman Avenue, despite the reduced speed limit on Highway 8, recently to 50 kilometers. And there's also associated noise and traffic. And anecdotally, the heavy vehicle traffic and noise on Highway 8 has significantly increased in the past 5 years. Moving on to the character of the street itself, our main concern with the proposed development is that it does not reflect the unique nature of our street itself. And the proposed subdivision does not respect the build form character of the neighborhood. Even though there are a variety of styles and sizes of houses on Kerman and in the area, ranging in height, they are all single detached houses with large lots and not semi-detached homes. The subdivision will negatively affect the low intensity nature of the neighborhood. We understand that Grimsby wants to support residential intensification where it makes sense. However, the proposed semi-detached development is not of an appropriate size and character for this site. In the planning justification document for the subdivision, and on page 1, it states that the proposed development will balance competing interests such as the economy, environment, and housing demands to accommodate residential growth forecasts. And the one thing that this leaves out is the people that live on and around Kerman Avenue. The subdivision doesn't represent the character or use of the street. Finally, I want to talk about the impact of the building process, or the potential building process. And if this proposal was to move forward, our street and neighborhood would be negatively impacted throughout the building process. And Mr. Phelps had mentioned the paving on Kerman Avenue, which was an interesting process. Construction parking, mud, dust, noise, pedestrian safety concerns, road cleanup plans will affect everyone on the street for a long time. And it's a small street, and currently traffic can be impacted by a car slowing down to check directions or a Canada Post vehicle picking up mail. I'll conclude by saying that as a longtime resident, we barely knew that there was an industrial greenhouse in operation on our street, except for the flower stand at the end of the driveway that was there sometimes. However, this subdivision will have a huge impact on the ongoing livability of our neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. Up next, we have Jessica Morrow, 258 Main Street West. Welcome, Jessica. I don't see Jessica, so we'll move on to Eric Willems, 73 Sumac Court. Welcome, Eric. Eric, you're muted. You still appear to be muted. There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry, Jeff. I have 3 points. The first one is we all enjoyed the Van Geese as a family in our neighborhood, and they've been an excellent greenhouse operator since World War II, I believe. And I know there's plaques going up, but I was hoping the town may do something special from a historical point of view in recognition of the Van Geese family in that area, perhaps on that walkway. I'm not muted, am I? Am I still muted?
No, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. So the Van Geese family and some form of recognition on the walkway that goes up to Highway 8. The second one is I think there should be a study by the fire department for easy access of fire vehicles. I think that's mandatory, especially since we have a high school nearby. That whole traffic zone can easily get tied up. We've had many times when Highway 8 or Kerman Avenue is blocked and then there's no traffic available. So I do believe the fire department should have a say as to the road access for fire vehicles and safety vehicles. And then finally, there's been so much discussion about traffic. This development must have a traffic study performed. Those are my 3 points.
Thank you, Eric. Up next, we have Lee Clammer, 3435 King Street. Welcome, Lee.
Hi, I was just wondering, are those two lots, those are legally separate lots, 9 and 11? And then I was wondering what the acreage was as well. I don't know if you could hear that.
Yeah, all the questions will be answered after after all the resident participation.
That's all I had.
All right, seeing no further residents, thank you everyone for coming out. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Just a quick question to planning staff, I think. This one is regarding why a cultural heritage study or a heritage impact assessment was not required, considering that we have 3 properties on Kerman that are on the Heritage Register, and we have one on Main, the fellow who just spoke, 242 Main West is on the register as well, and then 262 Main West Nixon Hall actually abuts the property. So I'm just wondering why we didn't have a cultural heritage impact assessment done for this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cadwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It's just a comment that Mr. Phelps brought up, and also the other resident on Kerman Avenue. When I listened to the presentation, again, the new paving that was done on Kerman Avenue, I had actually some concerns with that, because I believe we had the water main replaced and a lot of the old curbs were replaced. So it's actually it's a brand new road by the looks of it. So yeah, that's my only comments is if that has to be ripped up, that who has to look after totally redoing that road again, which is, it's kind of it's a sad thing, but you know, if that's the case. But yeah, again, just at this time now, it's just the Kerman Avenue road situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cadwell. Up next, Councillor Sharp.
Thanks, Mayor Jordan. I think the presentation was done well. I've seen this before in the pre-consultation. I'm wondering, is it possible to make the road going through from Sumac to Kerman, could that be a public road? And how would that change the development? That's my only question.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Seeing no further questions from council, there's a number of questions to be answered. We have both Jared and Adam available to answer them. So either of you can take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. There are a lot of comments and questions, so I'll do my best to touch on some of the broad points. I'm going to work backwards because some of these are fresh in my mind. To Councillor Sharp's question, the public road access was one of the original concepts we did look at to provide a full municipal width road of 20 meters through the development. Was going to result in very shallow lot depths throughout the development. So we made the decision to keep the linear road pattern, but go with a private road. So again, it was the very shallow lot depths that was the main driver in not going with a public right of way through the development. To Councillor Caldwell's concern about road reconstruction, if the engineering final engineering design for the site calls for upgrades on Kerman Avenue. That cost would be borne by the developer to reconstruct the road and repave the road to full municipal standards. So there shouldn't be any cost to the town for that. The next one was Councillor Bothwell. I'd have to defer that to Adam to answer the question about why a CHIA, but there were no, my opinion was that there were no heritage features on site, and with respect to Nixon Lane, there was no development proposed where it was abutting the heritage house, but Adam can provide some more detail there.
Yeah, I can address the concerns about the CHIA. So originally, some of the concepts when this project was originally proposed included some properties on Main Street. A specific one was 260 Main Street West. Now, when the project was going through the stages of development, those properties were not included in the development. And so because there were no developments specifically abutting right up against the heritage buildings or including any of the heritage buildings, the requirement was waived and it wasn't required at that point. But at any point, if any of the properties on Main Street were to be included in the future, that's when the cultural heritage impact assessment would be required. And just to answer Lee's questions about the two lots, they are separate lots, and the total acreage of the development is roughly 5.2 acres.
Thank you, Adam. Back to Jared now.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Working backwards through my list, there were some concerns about whether a traffic analysis was done. This applied to a number of the speakers. Broadly, a traffic analysis deals with the volume and functionality of site access points as well as surrounding access or surrounding intersections. If we're looking at Linden Lane and Sumac Court, as a general rule of thumb, a minor local street is designed to accommodate upwards of 2,000 vehicle trips per day. And so the addition of 44 units to Linden Lane or Sumac Court is generally not going to provide a significant enough amount of traffic to trip the need for any kind of traffic analysis. Whether there is significant volume already existing on Main Street West and Kerman Avenue, one is a regional road, one is a local road, whether there's any joint efforts between the two to continue to study those intersections and the saturation of those roads, that wouldn't have been part of this analysis. Again, 44 units isn't a high enough traffic volume to trip the need for upgrades or additional analysis. So that's why that report wasn't done. There was a concern from one of the speakers in regards to fire access, and what I can say is that the proposed private condominium road meets the minimum fire access requirements under the Ontario Building Code, and that the town's fire department does review these applications and comments to ensure that their needs are met. So from that perspective, that review has taken place, and we would say that the development meets those minimum requirements. In regards to building process, there's no way around it. Development is going to cause some impact in the short term to existing residents. There's just no way around it. That's all development applications. Most municipalities will have requirements through the detailed design and approvals process that would require an applicant to have a dust management or construction management plan in place that would detail things like cleanliness of the roads, contact for disputes or concerns arising in the neighborhood. So things like that would generally be covered under conditions of any approval that were were issued. There were concerns or comments about sidewalk connections, and what I can say is that some of the technical review comments have returned from staff departments, and one of those comments is that the engineering department is looking for a sidewalk connection on the south side of Linden Lane, or on Sumac rather, that would connect from Linden Lane to the internal development. So revised designs would likely show a full pedestrian connectivity from Kerman all the way to Linden Lane. I touched on the right-of-way issue. The cul-de-sac and private road, I mean, these are typical development options available to us, and that's the route we've taken. There's no need for restricting access to this development through a one-way road. I'm interested in the options about islands within the court. I've noted the other intersections that were talked about, so that's something we'll look at, and we can determine if it's feasible to add to this development. There were one of the residents noted that he'd had numerous discussions with the owner of the property. I'm aware of those discussions, and there are talks about making changes to the lotting fabric of this development. Those types of changes will come. We're waiting for, following the conclusion of this meeting, planning staff will issue their formal comments to us, and we will have to react to the comments made here tonight, as well as to the comments from the planning department. And changes will be made, and some of those changes might include changes to the lotting fabric facing Kerman Avenue, whether that's deeper lots with further setback units or one lot. We don't know what the final product's going to be until we get all those detailed comments, but we are aware of those conversations. And I'm remiss that I didn't mention it earlier in my presentation, but my client has been vocal with the neighborhood. He's been out there knocking on doors and talking to people to make sure that they're aware of these concerns. So many of these concerns have already been relayed to him, as well as now in the public theater. So we're very aware of most of these comments at present. There's talk about different stormwater management designs, and again, that's part of the process we're going through right now, which is going to be reacting to the town's comments and everyone else, and those detailed things will be solved. And then the last few comments came from one of the adjacent neighbors. There was comments about sidewalk, concerns about grading, and preliminarily, we have to, from a grading perspective, we have to maintain how the external drainage comes through our development, as well as from the street. We can't block people's drainage. So whatever's happening today will be will remain the same or be made in a better condition. You won't be left with grading that floods out your property. That's just, it's not something we can move forward with. The town will make sure of that as well. And there were concerns about traffic calming in a general sense. And while, personally I agree with traffic calming, it's not something other than traffic calming within the cul-de-sac we're doing or immediately adjacent to the property. Broad traffic calming in this neighborhood is a step that staff and council would have to initiate. It's not something we can cover under our applications. And there was a question about grading on the schoolyard lands. Again, it's external to the site, so unless something we're proposing immediately impacts that and needs to be resolved, it wouldn't be part of this development application. Some broad comments there. There's a lot of questions and a lot of opinions that I can't really provide answers to at this point, but hopefully that answered everyone's questions. If there is something specific that I've overlooked, I do have all the notes here, but I'm happy to try to circle back to something.
Great. Thank you very much, Jared, for your answers, and you as well, Adam. And thank you, everyone, for participating this evening. The consultants and staff will take back your feedback. And please contact staff at planning@grimsby.ca if you have any additional comments or questions about the proposal after this evening. So seeing no further questions or comments, the meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.